COVID-19 pandemic continues to intensify, many of us are left wondering, is there any sort of a silver lining to this scenario? And one of the unforeseen side effects of the pandemic may be the coming of age of the Indian innovation ecosystem. To shed more light on the subject, we're joined by a highly distinguished panel of subject matter experts, all of whom happen to be nominees for the ETPrime Women Leadership Awards 2020 in the Accenture Vaahini Innovator of the Year category. Please allow me to introduce them. We have with us the founder and CEO of MapMyGenome, Acharya, the founder and CEO of Wysa, Aggarwal, and the founder and CEO of Sheroes, Sairee Chahal. Sairee, I'd love to, of course, kick off the conversation with you. And I'll start by saying, I believe I speak for everyone in saying that, for India to successfully combat the coronavirus pandemic in any sort of a meaningful way, an all-hands-on-deck approach is absolutely critical. So does that mean now is the time to inculcate a culture of innovation across the country, or has India been innovating all along? And it's just now is the time that the world is finally starting to sit up and take notice.
Well, I think, India is not new to innovation. I think we are a country that innovated for a long time, and I think if you double click on our ancient history, I think we are actually a culture that's been ahead of its time, in many time spaces. But I think if you zoom to the period that we are in, I think what the pandemic is doing to all of us is it's really making us question a lot of our assumptions about progress. It's making us question, our models of development. It's also making us rethink fundamentally how we live and work, And I think these are all pointers to some of the possibilities that lie ahead. And look, we're a country of 1 billion people, which means we're a country of 1 billion minds and double the number of hands and for people who can devote themselves to making any change. And a lot of our change traditionally has been very organic, which means it comes from the context where people operate from. So whether it is indigenous problem solving in science, or whether it is contraptions that are farm laborers use, or whether it is just in business model innovation. So whether it is our way of doing e-commerce or our way of doing banking. But the truth remains that we're a country that has enough challenges and enough opportunities, and both are, I think, the same coin that's being tossed around. And some of the things that are sort of manifesting themselves as we sort of go forward are, one, our organic way of living. I think we are a country that's primarily a rural country. And I think that's an opportunity that's sort of, showing up in our face over and over again. Second is just decentralization. Do we want to be as consumptive an economy as the rest of the world? Do we want to match US in fossil fuel consumption? Is that a question that we want to work on? Or do we want to build alternate models and go solar first as a country? And I think we are the leapfrog nation. And I think our telco revolution is the biggest example in the playbook. So clearly there are some very large opportunities India has. And I think some of these things like closing of US economy or closing of visas, these are all sort of, I think, signs in sort of innovating in India, for India, and things like remote work. I think these are all sort of ideas of sustainable development that have been imposed upon us, and it's now upon us on how do we translate them into real measures of progress, not just during the pandemic, but in the next 5 to 10 years. So a lot of signs of innovation, lot of blended models. I think India is a blended country. We don't fit in, clear lines, and those are possibilities that lie ahead.
Joe, I'd love to bring you into the conversation now. And I essentially echo Sairee's sentiments in that we've seen lots of signs of innovation, whether it be at an international level, at a national level, at an institutional level, or even at the individual level. So I'd love, for the benefit of our viewers, for you to perhaps hone in on some of the most promising examples of innovation within your particular industry, and perhaps some examples of innovation that have taken you by surprise within the context of the 4 walls of your organization.
let's just take the pandemic context. So the one thing that I believe innovation thrives on is constraints. And in India, there's never been a lack of constraints. And the word jugaad, as it's been created, has been about getting over the constraints. But there's also a kind of innovation that is, it never surprises me when in India, at least, we come up with innovations that get over constraints. So say demonetization happened and we figured out so many ways to get the mass, your sabji wala, everybody into a digital economy. The ways in which we are able to, when needed, get people in. For instance, right now with the pandemic, the one thing that I'm seeing, which I think is going to be completely country changing if we seize that opportunity, is the way young kids are learning, especially in vernacular and middle schools, municipal schools. They're learning virtually for the first time. That opens up a whole dimension that culturally wasn't possible, but it happened, on the fly in every home. There'll be the mother's phone or somebody's mobile phone is now the child's property to take their classes on. And that becomes a priority for the family, no matter what, how you do it. So I think at that level as well, as an individual level or at a large scale level, we've always been a country that has overcome constraints and figured out how to get what we want. And similarly, our team within our own organization, struggling with how do we keep in touch, how do we figure out how to be creative together, how do we take care of each other. We've had people send food care packages to each other. We've had online ordering. We've had online Pictionary games that are just organically coming in from the team. That just shows that you care. But I think the concept of innovation where we tend to not do as well as a nation is independently of constraints, trying to say that this is a big global problem, not just mine. And we are going to try to solve it, not just overcome constraints. So that's resource independent thinking. And that's something that even as an organization, we are struggling with at the moment, because so far it was, we're going to solve this problem of mental health. The constraint is stigma, the constraint is price, the constraint is lack of access to therapists. And suddenly you're faced with an environment where every government on earth, every insurer, every employer is keen to do something, is willing to fund it. There's no constraint left. And now, what fuels your innovation? There's not even any stigma left around mental health in this environment. What fuels your innovation? How do you think about being that organization that will create the new digital therapeutics in this space if, because we are no longer remotely working from India, but we're actually on a level playing field with everybody else in the world. We can partner with hospitals in a matter of weeks, providers or payers in a matter of weeks. It used to take years and multiple trips. Now, in that environment, how do you innovate? That's one of the challenges that we are dealing with, to say, let's actually show that we can do something big without the constraints as well.
I know, a fantastic time to bring you in here. And I'd like to sort of hone in on one of Joe's points, which is that the pandemic has been a leveler of sorts, and India is now on an equal level playing field. Do you consider that to be true, or are you of the opposite view, and do you believe there are unique pain points and plus points to India's innovation landscape in particular?
I think both of Sairee and Joe have brought up all the good parts. Let me also bring in some things that are not so good. And I think it's very important, because I think while we have been able to do some jugaad innovation for the time being, I don't think it is sustainable unless we actually tackle some of the main pain points today that are there. Because when you look at innovation as a whole, I think there are 3 or 4 things. I think Joe brought out one very important one, which is constraints. But I think it needs a healthy dose of inspiration. It needs a direction. And it also needs some sort of an intent from not just an organization, but also as a country. And I think over there are lots of challenges that do come up when you're actually doing things on the ground. And while a lot of things have happened in the last 3-4 months that are sort of positive, I think it has also brought up a lot of things which are the fault lines in our, in the whole ecosystem that we have. And it's not to tell people that, all is lost, but I think it is a great time for us to be sitting down and saying, what did we do wrong? And it's very important for us to do that, because the pandemic will go away, the supply chains will open, the multinationals will be back again. So all the demand that is there today for Indian, Atmanirbharta and all, I think that will go away unless we create truly quality, innovative products. And by that I mean that when you make something in a very quick time frame, I think it's good, because at this point there is no choice, and therefore we see a lot of whether it is test products, whether it's many other things. I think a lot of attention is given to all of them. But when you want to really think about how people actually buy products at scale, I think there are multiple elements that are there in it. And whether it is, whether we trust our own products, that's the first important thing. And the reason why we don't trust our own products is another reason. But the other thing is also that when you look at, what is it that is required in an innovative product, right? First is very important is the environment that you can create. Now, whether you create it in your own house, your own lab and other things, I think that adds up. So little by little, it all adds up. But in the end, I think there are also things like, is there a need? Is there a market? Is there quality processes that have been followed? Because if you create a product without quality, it's of no use. Somebody else will take it up and actually commercialize it. So I think there are multiple elements, whether it is intellectual property, whether it is challenges in terms of regulatory challenges that you face. Even within the constraints, I think a lot of things have come up, but almost everybody on the ground will tell you that there are many problems that are coming up, even with simple things, right? So I think that's where we should be able to sit back, analyze and see what is it? Do we have an environment which has enough inspiration to be able to do that without having to worry about, consequences? Because innovation ultimately requires that we do bring in people that can a product or a process that will actually survive beyond the pandemic. I think that has to be the most important thing. That I have gone through one in 2009-10 when we did H1N1, and I remember those times very well. I was very committed, and it's the same thing now, right? This time it's even bigger. But one of the things we all must remember is that whatever we make is not for those few months. It has to be something that we can take and replicate and make better over a period of time. Whether it is creating SOPs for how things are to be done, whether it is giving people the freedom to make mistakes, whether it is giving people the right kind of regulatory environment to be able to innovate. So I think all these add up. And I won't take up more time. I think I've been talking too long, so I'll let you continue.
So, Sairee, switching gears a bit, there's been a sort of an anti-China sentiment that's brewing in the air, as we've seen several suite of apps now banned nationwide. Do you believe this will result in a spur of innovation, homegrown innovation on Indian turf?
Right. So I think there are two issues here. One is a geopolitical macro issue of China and China's global behavior and how the world deals with China. And I think that's a subject of separate discussion. But look, I think yes, we did ban Chinese apps, but what is the impact of those apps on our economy? And if you just look at it, the truth is, it really doesn't matter. Okay, some people will not have TikTok on their phones, but really, who cares? I think we as a country need to be a little more grounded in what we need. We have to be a little honest about where we stand. So if we look at our broad needs as a country today, so clearly our healthcare infrastructure has been spotlighted during the pandemic, and if we as a country do not move our resources and our attention to healthcare, I don't think we will survive something as big again. And second is education, and the changing nature of education. I don't think we can ignore it anymore, and the center state fight can't sort of make scapegoat of education anymore. Thirdly, infrastructure. Either we make infrastructure an equalizer for all citizens, either we bring everybody to the digital economy or we don't. If you're going to do a half job out of it, we are going to create more further inequality in the ecosystem. And I think these are really hard pressing problems facing this country. And if we don't solve for this, we also let go of the opportunity that lies ahead of us. You know, the demographic opportunity, the consumer opportunity, the opportunity to create value for a large number of users. So I'm particularly not worried about, letting go of Chinese apps, but I do think at a global level, everyone should have raised their voice when China went and did stuff in Hong Kong, when China passed the security bill, because what it can do in one country, it can also transgress in, other economies. So whether it's Bhutan or India or, 14 other states it has disputes with. So I think China needs to be dealt at a very different level. But what we need to look at is, yes, we are a country of young people who are all on smartphones. We are a country of 600 million smartphone users. And a lot more younger people sort of adopting it, and therefore the kind of attention it got, because clearly this is the demographic that's using all those Chinese apps. Yes, our innovators, our engineers, our consumer product makers, they all have a chance to build products, but I don't think we need to build copycat products. I think we should build products that work for us. Really, we shouldn't be thinking about building another TikTok. We should be thinking about building products that our society needs, or our economy needs, or products that are very native to us. So, so whether it is constructive products, or even in media, I think there is a lot of opportunity that lies ahead of us. But look, innovation is not copying somebody else's idea and making it yours. So innovation is really building in the context you are placed in, so and I think there is no country that's sort of become a top 5 economy by building copycat ideas. So that's the number one takeaway from this whole episode, that Chinese apps are not, but we got to build what's relevant to us. And I wouldn't really worry about Chinese apps going away. They really weren't doing much to our GDP, so we can all relax a little bit.
So, Jo, I'll take my next question to you, which is that if as a result of this Chinese ban, if we see a new wave of innovation, of a new wave of homegrown development of apps that are for Indians, by Indians, what sort of challenges do you anticipate they'll face with respect to seeking funding, with respect to securing financing to become scalable and ultimately becoming sustainable, self-sufficient entities?
So, first of all, I'd delink it from the Chinese ban. As Sairee said, I don't think the Chinese ban is really relevant to India. China continues to be in how it has created homegrown platforms that were really, that have overshot Western platforms. It continues to be a source of inspiration in that regard. I don't think hate, which is a very good uniting force in the short term, is a force for innovation in any term. And it's not a force for inspiration for sure. That energy peters out really fast. So I'd start out by saying that let's just take an environment where suddenly there are lots of new needs. And there are people who are saying, well, I have an idea which is super relevant for this environment and can actually help India. And there would be people who would struggle to get funding even as this happens, just because VC funds, irrespective of the fact, have decided to double down on existing portfolio companies. There'll be other people who are also still able to network and be tried out much more quickly because there's such a huge market need. So I do think that ideas which have more of a revenue potential this year, we'll see a quick go-to-market, whether it's an app or an offline service. If they can find a good revenue model, they will probably find it easier in these coming years to make money. They might find it harder to raise money. And some part of me thinks that that's actually really good for entrepreneurship.
Sure. Well, one struggle that I know many entrepreneurs are facing is with respect to funding. They're not able to secure funding to bring their innovative ideas to life. And drawing from your own personal experience, what might be your words of advice to entrepreneurs who find themselves in that scenario?
So I would say that funding has been has always been a problem, especially for those doing anything in innovation from the beginning. I think now is the time actually where possibly, at least on the healthcare side, that more innovative ideas are likely to get funded because there is a need now. And I think people have started to understand that there is a real need and we can't ignore health as something that is secondary. And therefore, I feel that at least on, whether it is healthcare, including mental health or otherwise, I think there is a definite demand that is there. And I would think that anybody who's bringing in something that's solving a pain point right now will probably see either funding or revenues, in one way or the other, right? So there will be that need. The second part will be for those where we are trying to build long-term solutions, whether it is drug discovery or otherwise. And I think that will continue to have a little bit of a challenge. So you will need to find someone where there is a possibility of getting those sort of, those long-term products that require 6 to 8 years. I think that's where India has always seen a challenge, and we will continue to see that. And the only solution for that will be to find somebody who's willing, whether it's a large corporate or someone else who's willing to fund that, and only then we will see some additional, some sort of an way that the innovative products will see light of the day, right? But at least on some of the other areas, I feel that there is an opportunity right now, and it need not be VC funded, right? I think what companies should do is to aim to build products where they can make revenues, and then use their own revenues to find ways to continue to innovate. And I think that would be my advice. And also, if people are not really keen on, not really passionate about that thing, they should probably look at alternate careers, because there's no point in being an entrepreneur when you're not really truly committed to it, but you only went in because you saw potentially large funding that came in for others. And I think this is a time where you really need to evaluate and see, is this something you want to do? Because it's not going to be easy. It might seem easy, but it isn't. So I think that's another thing that I've continued to tell people, that don't just look at it as being something that's glamorous. Do it only if you feel truly you can impact people's lives. Because entrepreneurship is a long-term thing. It's a marathon, like my dad says, not a sprint.
Very inspiring words there. And I want to sort of transition a bit here, and I pose this question to the entire panel. A flavor of innovation that has become very front and center nowadays is business model innovation. Sort of abandoning or perhaps putting aside your original idea with the goal being to address more immediate pressing needs from elsewhere. So in the context of your own individual professional journeys, is business model innovation something you've considered and acted upon? Sairee, I'd love to start with you here before we get to the others.
So I think we've been a little bit of a challenger here, because I think we kept so as a company, we have a very strong thesis. We have two sort of, defining principles. One is everything we do has to benefit women directly, which means we're in the business of giving and we're not in the business of taking. And that itself sort of turns the whole idea of business on its head. But I think there are two things that trigger that. One is we are a poor country with very, very poor GDP numbers. So really, we're really not in a market where your users have a lot of purchasing power to begin with. So we're very cognizant of that. So we say when women come to Sheroes, they should benefit from it, which means they should be able to derive a tangible value to either their own personal identity, their own personal network, their ability to make money, or get support around well-being. So that's how we define value. And then, of course, the second is we kept investing in the community before triggering any monetization event. So which meant that it was like farming bamboo, right? So you keep growing it for a period of time when you have nothing to show for it for a very, very long period. But then once you switch it on, once it sort of starts to show, once it grows, right? And that's exactly what happened with us. So for the first, I think 3-4 years of our existence, we were just investing in our community. We were growing the base, and we were also testing a lot of other things that we wouldn't have been able to if had we switched on our monetization engine. And at the beginning of this year, we actually did switch on a monetization engine, and you'll be surprised to believe that it took us 2 quarters to break even, right? And of course, the pandemic did sort of add to our urgency and our speed and all of that. And what we realize is that today our business is basically built around the thesis of making sure women find remote work, women find our platform as a means to entrepreneurship, micro entrepreneurship particularly, and access to financial products and access to well-being. So it really did take a lot of challenging traditional wisdom, a lot of fights with VCs, a lot of sort of arguments along the way. But we figured, look, we want to work in the context we are. India is home to 600 million women, out of which 200 million women have come online in last 2.5, 3 years. So clearly we are seeing something happen in front of our eyes, and if we are not going to sort of respond to this, then it's an opportunity that is lost. So my sort of belief around business models is that you have to build business models that work for the market you are in. And so right after World War II, we saw the birth of the biggest luxury brands that we know today, Chanel and Louis Vuitton, and anybody you name it. And that happened particularly in parts of Western Europe, mostly Paris, because that became a hub for consumptive behaviors, post-war consumptive behaviors, and a lot of rich people were available to sort of build that market. But you have to respond to the market that you are in. China did it differently, Singapore did it differently, US did it very, very differently. So I think we have to build it in the way we understand the world and not the way the world understands us.
Oh, and Joe, I'd love for you to weigh in with your experience.
Yes. So we are 4 pivots in to even get to Wysa. And it's, the entire company is based on solving a problem. And that problem being mental health. It's as broad as that. The business model comes secondary to that. But even with the pandemic, what we've seen in Wysa has been such a change in the environment around us that we could no longer make any assumptions. And we were actually very counter-cyclical. So for everybody else, the environment became highly constrained. For us, all our constraints vanished. So suddenly we were faced with an environment that is saying, okay, how much money do you need? How much funding do you need? If your sales cycles have crunched, if FDA has lifted regulation requirements, approval requirements for digital health product in your field to be able to go out and be tried out, if all of that has happened suddenly in the course of a month, and in that environment, you have to really say, okay, what are the assumptions that you made about your business model? A lot of the assumptions that we started on, we had to literally take away. And the way we did it was just by doing a mental exercise where we said, okay, let's assume that we have just bought our company, that we are no longer the founders of this company. And I think every founder should do this periodically. So just pretend they're coming from the outside and buying their company, still committed to the mission, but understanding the environment and saying, okay, I'm going to now buy this company, and what's my vision for it in this new environment, and why am I buying it? So we've done that exercise, and it's actually done huge pivots. I mean, B2C was something that was very critical for us. We directly work with 2 million people who talk to Wysa, and we help them across the world, most of them for free. About 1% of them actually pay. That remains very close to the mission. But as we've discovered the opportunities with digital health and what we can do really fast, I think we're turning into a company which is going to go more and more clinical, and beyond B2C, going into much more digital health as a therapeutic and as a full care pathway, not just in preventative health, which is where we thought we could come earlier. So some of those innovations require you to set up new scientific advisory boards, hire teams in other parts of the world, and do it all while chasing all these orders that are potentially coming in. So it's one of those times where, yes, you think of business model, but you're also trying to deliver on the old one, build the new one, and keep going. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Absolutely, you have perfectly. And I'd like to take the same question to Anu by asking her, at what junctures in the company's life cycle have you pivoted at MapMyGenome, and how do you essentially evaluate the success of those business decisions?
guess I'll start with the latest one, which is about a month ago. And we have suddenly become a path lab in the sense, right? Because we started doing COVID testing, but because we had the experience for the last 20 years. And so, I mean, this is my second company, in MapMyGenome second. We had awesome, we had built lab information systems. We had helped a lot of companies do work with pharma companies, biotech companies, diagnostic companies, and so on. Everything suddenly came together, right? So about a month ago, it was like testing everything we had done in the last 20 years, trying to see if whatever knowledge we had gained, whether it was helping people scale up, whether it was automating the whole business, whether it was making sure that safety protocols are followed. Everything came together, and we were able to do that very, very quickly. And I think it was partly because not because we suddenly decided to pivot, but because it was the need. It was the need that people wanted, and we thought that given our expertise, we were able to do that faster. So in many ways, we were able to quickly get our limbs together, make sure that the reports are automated, the orders are automated, everything is done. That we can scale up the testing needs by setting up everything, and all this was done during lockdown. So getting whether it was getting the NABL accreditation, getting ICMR approval, getting all of that. And so I think today we were able to very quickly come up to being one of the most trusted labs that is there in the city. And that's partly because of all the things that we have done in the past that allowed us to be able to do that. So to think not just as being someone who can come up with a test, which is an easy thing to do, but to be able to say, how do you serve somebody quickest, fastest, and make sure that you communicate to them well, because this is clearly a situation that none of us has been in before. We never have been in a pandemic situation before. So I think that's what we have done lately. But at the same time, I would say that because of the fact that we've been able to serve a lot of people very, very quickly, it has also brought into fore all the other things that we've been doing so far, whether it was understanding the risk and immunity report that we did for our customers. So just to give a brief idea, Geopolitical was what we sold for the last 6-7 years, right? Geopolitical and many other sequencing sort of needs. What has happened, what we did first in April, which was the pivot, or not really pivot, but it was basically trying to address our customers' needs at that point, was to be able to give them a report that would address COVID risk and immunity. So that we sent to all our customers for free. And I think that got a lot of we got a lot of goodwill because of that. And they were customers from across the globe. And then when COVID started and there was a need for testing, we were one of the first that was ready to be able to do that. So now what has happened is for everything that we've built, and that was a very, very slow momentum, it was going slowly. We were growing every year, but it was still, the numbers were small. What we've started to see is that because we've been at it for so long, and because we've been able to gain the trust of our customers, I think you start to see there's a rapid increase even in the regular business as well. So in many ways, I think while pivots are important, we always have to remember what we were there, what we started this business for. And the pandemic, I think, is an opportunity for us to be able to help, but it's also an opportunity to be able to gain trust from people that never knew about us. So that's the way I look at it.
Sure. All phenomenal points. And a term that has come up in the conversation earlier on multiple occasions, in fact, is this term of jugaad, which is essentially the drive to identify solutions in the wake of limited resources. So another question to the entire panel here is, to what extent is this Indian flavor of innovation, a reflection of our cultural influences, our socio-economic influences? And in this jugaad-driven innovative environment, do women leaders perhaps have an advantage? Sairee, I'd love to start with you.
Well, I think I do feel that we glorify jugaad a lot, and while I think it's fantastic in the short term, but you can't build a country based on jugaad. Right? You can't be $1 trillion economy. You can't be the top 5 of the world economies. You can't be world class with jugaad. And I think while we celebrate jugaad a lot, we also need to sort of actually celebrate people who do deep work. And I think as a country, we do not recognize, reward, or even encourage deep work. And the truth is, there is no innovation that has come out of, flaky experiences. It's good to survive when you need to survive, but there's really nothing great that can come out of this mindset of short-term quick fixes, and our idea of jugaad is very that, right? And I think whether it is research in healthcare, or whether it is building world-class consumer apps, or whether it is building companies that are domain leaders in their own right, or just rendering governance to its citizens. I think jugaad is great, but it's not all that great. It's really like junk food. It's fantastic for a few days. And I think as a country, we need to internalize that. We need to internalize that we're not going to be a major superpower or whosoever we want to be in this world without going deep and without making our peace with failures. I think we're very quick to shoot the messenger. We're very quick to write off founders who fail. We're very quick to sort of downward governments who are not populist. So I think that's who we are culturally. But if we don't change, then we continue to be this large, poor country, with a lot of dreams. It's nice for movies, but in real life, you want to sort of move forward after a point in time. So, and especially I think when you look at younger people, when you look at people who are, Gen Z today, I don't think they really romanticize jugaad as much as we do, because their exposure to the world and their exposure to excellence is very different. So I think instead of jugaad, we should be celebrating excellence. We should be celebrating really thinking long term, doing high quality work, being recognized for our depth. I think as a country, we become a PR nation. We could tone that down a little bit and sort of reward people who are actually doing real work. Doctors and scientists and farmers and healthcare workers and teachers. There's absolutely no real jugaad there. I mean, they might be sort of, hacking their way into laptops and putting it on top of their books to sort of get to the height they need to. But look, beyond that, we need to recognize deep work.
Jo, I'd love your take here. Do you essentially echo Sairee's sentiments, or is your view entirely different?
Not entirely, but I have a chance to have a non-universal view in this panel now. I think I look at jugaad more as a part of, say, the hero's journey. If you think of how any hero's journey is, then the initial thing before they discover their superpower, they get a lot of problems, and then they discover superpower and they get a lot of quick wins. And think of that as India's superpower, right? That they discover that they can do jugaad and they get a lot of quick wins. And I think that's an important part of the hero's journey. That's an important part of our self-confidence as a nation. Our confidence that we can handle big issues comes from our concept that somehow with jugaad we will do it. I think everything that I have done and attempted to do, and I've attempted to do some pretty crazy things in my life, including trying to just solve mental health, like it's waiting for me to solve. No psychiatry degree, no health background, not even an AI person. But there is that sense of we'll figure it out, right? And that I think is not just I think research shows that is a greater predictor of success than any other thing. You can be better at math than somebody else in high school or in elementary school, but if you believe you're better at math, if you believe you can do the math well, you're more likely to do math later in life. Same for entrepreneurship. If you believe you can succeed. So I think jugaad is important in us having that first half, but second half of a hero's journey always pitches them against a battle that they can't win with just a superpower. They have to delve deep into saying who they really stand for, who they are, what is it that's going to actually. They have to go inside them, and I think that self-reflection that Sairee is talking about as a nation, we do have to do. It's good that the nation is building confidence. It's good that the nation is starting to believe that it can do things. It also needs to be able to take a very cold, hard look at what it will take to make success happen, because tomorrow's challenges are not going to be met by PR.
Right. And Anu, I'll give you the last word here.
All right, great. So let me contextualize it with something that we're all familiar with, and that is, when, let's say, somebody gets COVID, and what the body first does is the first fight. There is a natural, like an immunity that comes in first, right? So that's your immediate fight of this thing. So you fight off, you get a fever, and you're all, at least that's the first sense of defense that is there. And I think that's like jugaad, right? You have the ability to fight an immediate threat in some form. But in reality, what you really need to build for long-term innovation is your, long-term immunity, which is the adaptive immunity, or the IgGs in this case, right? You want to be able to build that because next time that problem comes in, you are able to fight it off. And you can't fight it without having that sort of level of understanding and being able to have the deep structure of innovation within the organization or within the country, right? And I think that's where the difference is. So while it's a good thing to have this very sudden reflex of saying, I will solve the problems in the country, I will manufacture PPEs, I will manufacture ventilators, I will manufacture this, I'll manufacture that. And I think that's a good, definitely an important and a very important part to do. But the second part is saying, how do we make sure that we solve the problems for the future anytime anything like this ever comes again, right? And I think that's where we still need to go back, relook at everything else that we have done and say, how do we build that long-term immunity, or how do we build that long-term culture of innovation within the country? And I think that will not happen without us looking at, why we haven't allowed people to make mistakes. And I think Sairee mentioned, we write off people who have failed once. That's a very important part. The second part is, how do we make sure that, while chaos is an important part of innovation, how do we make sure that there is some sort of a directional that we can get people to start thinking about it? And the third is, of course, that, how do we make sure that your deep science actually thrives? And for that, it's not just about, right now, I think even our basic infrastructure, when you look at it, we've built now 1,000 labs in the country. And I think that has been incredible, right? How do we make sure that these 1,000 labs are available next time something like this happens, right? So I think, this is probably the first time we did that. And I really felt that, ICMR and NABL and others did a fantastic job of being able to do that, because it brings a level of quality within what we are delivering. But it's important that we're able to do that in every corner of the country, right? And how do we make sure that, so there is execution of getting things done. There is actually getting people to truly build something. And I think that can't happen by just saying, I'm going to build a mission. We need to have scientists who can think and be creative. And we often miss that, because that freedom to be able to do that infrastructure to be able to create it is what the same scientists who are born in India go to the US are thriving on. So all we need to do is to say that we need to understand that why is it that, what are we missing here, and can we build that over here? And I think, the pandemic has been a great start for us to think about a lot of things. It has been the first time that I've been able to work with governments, with academia and companies without thinking, that we are different. We are all fighting the same enemy. But I don't want this to be something that later on we forget and we go on about our own lives. And I think that would be my advice, that, this is a great time to sit back, think about what we can do for the future.
That is all that we have time for, ladies. But before we wrap, I'd like to congratulate you once more on your nomination as a part of the ETPrime Women Leadership Awards 2020. I'd also like to re-acknowledge our partners in this effort, namely our presenting partner, Accenture, and our knowledge partner, Accord India. But I'd especially like to thank all of you for sharing so many anecdotes from your personal and professional journeys. We truly appreciate it. With that, it's a wrap. Thanks for watching.